Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the show, Detroit runs on rhythm. Not just the kind you hear, but the kind you live.
The rhythm of grocery carts rolling down aisles, of city hall meetings and corner store chatter. The everyday pulse that keeps this place moving.
But this week, that rhythm falters as the federal shutdown threatens to snap. We'll ask how neighbors and state leaders are stepping in.
Later, we'll visit the Car Center, where artists are building bridges between generations, honoring Detroit's past while imagining what comes next.
Stories of scarcity, creativity, and endurance, told in Detroit's own cadence. This is the Metro.
We begin today by examining how politics could drive hunger instead of fighting it. It's day 30 of the government shutdown, and key programs are set to pause. Among them, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It helps more than 40 million Americans keep food on the table. In Michigan, about 1.4 million residents depend on those benefits. But the federal pause may delay November's issuance. The ripple effects will be painful. Families staring at empty dinner tables, local stores, urban farms, and pantry networks scrambling to respond. In Detroit, one leader in that scramble is Amanda Brazel. She co-founded and now serves as creative director of Finnegan's Farms. That's an urban agriculture and community design studio that's devoted to food access, sustainability, and resilience. Today, she joins me to describe what she's hearing on the ground and what advocates are doing in real time. Amanda, welcome back.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So when the news broke that November's SNAP benefits might be delayed, how did you first feel the change? Not just as a farmer, but as a neighbor. What did you start hearing and from whom?
Well, initially, I noticed, just in my neighborhood, a lot of people were, we're a pretty close-knit neighborhood, so we were coming together, our usual gatherings, and folks were talking like, hey, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to have my benefits, right? And different people are having that conversation. So at first, it was a little bit of that. I think now, though, it's a little bit more of folks coming together and rallying. If someone's going to a pantry, they're asking the neighbor, hey, I'm going to go to the pantry. Do you need anything? Can I bring something back? Neighbors cooking meals for one another. So I'm seeing a lot of people, they're fearful. There's also a whole other level of resilience that exists across the city of Detroit, a neighborly resilience. And I feel like that's what's coming into focus right now.
A mix of fear and resilience. I mean, which households around you would you say are most exposed if those benefits don't come? What kinds of choices are people describing to you between, let's say, groceries, rent, gas, medicine?
I think it's all of that. And, quite honestly, before we got to this point, people were already having to make those decisions. And I think that that's why some folks feel a little bit more equipped for this moment, because for the last several months, honestly, since January, we have been dealing with all of this uncertainty. And so there are a lot of people who are fearful, but I'm noticing that people are also like, I was kind of planning for this, but the decision to pay rent or pay for daycare expenses or to put gas in the car to get the kids to school. Those are all decisions that people are having to make right now. And they're also decisions folks have been confronted with in the last few months as well.
So the potential pause to SNAP benefits is just sort of deepening something that people have already been feeling from inflation and the rising cost of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
SNAP dollars move through local shops and farmers markets as fast as any currency. When that flow stops, talk about what happens in a place like Detroit. How do you see it affecting small grocers and corner stores and the growers you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different avenues. As you know, I work in the policy space, and so in the foods policy space specifically. And so we've been following and tracking these things and these impacts to the system. And honestly, our local food system really depends on people being able to buy vegetables, from their farmers, from these corner stores. Detroit recently updated several corner stores across the city to provide fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
And so if you have all of these places and they genuinely are, they are reliant on dollars being spent there. So I don't, some of that is going to be okay because you have people who are going to be able to afford what they need. But I do think that a lot of these places are going to see a decrease in patronage because if I can't buy something, I'm not going into the store. And I think on our farms, it's a little bit of a different story because on one hand, yes, a few of our farms do take, SNAP EBT. And they've been operating in that way, especially at the farmers market. We're thinking double up food bucks, right?
Yep.
All of those things are still working, or all of those things exist to create this system. But if folks are not able to participate, that's a huge part of the market that is it's just gone. Now in farming, though, what we are seeing, the Detroit Black food sovereignty movement is something that is rooted in this kind of thing, is rooted in trying to make sure our communities have what we need when there are emergencies. And so I'm seeing a lot of farmers come out. I want to shout out Green Boots out here in Travis, working to, these are farmers who typically sell their food, who are giving it away for free because they know that there's a need. And at the end of the day, we didn't build all of these farms just to make money. We built these farms to feed people, and that's what's happening.
So this crisis and continuing impending crisis is sending a message to folks, one that many already have been working through, which is that depending on systems, on governmental systems, can be very unreliable. And again, you're talking about the resilience here of the community and the strength of the community. But Amanda, if this pause lasts weeks instead of days, things are going to break, right? Is it supply, cold storage, transportation, volunteer capacity? I mean, what do you think is the most fragile link in the chain?
I think you're seeing a lot of the fragility coming in the space where you have your consumers, right? So if you don't have anyone, if we look at the chain, right, if all the way at the end of the chain, right, is the actual putting the food on the table. And if that's not happening, then everything else in that assembly line backs up. So if I don't have anywhere to put the produce, then there's no point in me aggregating it from farms, right? There's no point in me transporting it. There's no point in me stocking shelves if no one's going to eat the food or if the food is going to be wasted. And right. And so I'm not saying that producers are just going to stop, sending food to grocery stores, but I do think that we will see little lags in this assembly line because if the end product is not there, if there's not the consumer to take in the produce, who can't pay for the produce, now I can't pay the farmer. I'm not paying the transporter. I'm not paying the aggregator, the food processor. All of these things, these are all reliant on these contracts, on this entire system moving specifically to feed people. That's what it was built for. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see all of these little points across the line. Thinking about what it takes to get food from a farm and into a grocery store and then onto your table. There's lots of people that take care of that. There's lots of systems that are at play. And so, yeah, if the consumer isn't getting what they need, then, it's just like any other situation where, supply and demand, right? Yeah. So we'll see. I think we're going to see some backups. I think that people are just, I also know that these are the kinds of things that end up, unfortunately, spurring chaos. And so, if people are scared, if people don't know where they're getting their food, if people don't know how to take care of their children, their elderly, their families, it puts us not just in a physically tenuous situation, but like emotionally, like well-being, all of that is something that is impacted. So I think we're going to see a lot of people who look like they've got the wind taken out of their sails because they kind of have.
Amanda, in a crisis like this, how do you keep that sense of dignity alive while asking for emergency help? I mean, you talk about food sovereignty a lot, about people feeding themselves on their own terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to make sure that we understand that, especially within the city of Detroit, when we're talking about food sovereignty, while I would love, while we want to put the emphasis on making sure that people understand where their food is coming from and have a say in that, it is not something that's done in isolation. And so, what we're really thinking about is this level of community food sovereignty, that our neighbors are helping one another, we're taking care of one another, and we're returning to our roots as a city and as a people who care for one another and take care of each other's needs. And so I think that we have to kind of move past this, oh, if I need SNAP, if I need emergency assistance, then there's something wrong with me. I should feel shame. I should feel guilt, right? We are all being pushed to our last penny. And if you're not getting pushed to your last penny, then I encourage you to support people who are. And so, we're in this space now where I want people to hold on to that dignity. You needing support from your neighbors is not anything shameful. That is how community works. That is community care. And so I want people to be able to feel good about being able to lean into community, lean into your neighborhood, lean into the people who can support you right now. It is okay. We don't do anything in isolation except for, be born and die, right? And so, all of that in between, it is okay for us to need one another, to want one another, to care for one another. And so I want people to feel that. At different points growing up, we needed SNAP as well. And, you start to feel a little like, oh, there's something wrong, or, I feel, this sense of shame, or maybe even us growing up and going to food pantries, those kinds of things. You feel this like, what did I do wrong to be here? And I want people to really understand that before any of this happened, you didn't do anything wrong in order to be here. These kinds of support exist because people need them. Even if you're working hard, and even right now in this moment, it is okay to need support. It really is. It is not a shameful thing. The people who should be feeling shame are the people who should have come together to make the decision to make sure people could get fed.
I know you've worked very hard to try and destigmatize things like food aid. Do you think a crisis like this is deepening that stigma?
I'm sorry, the stigma regarding
accessing food aid. Is a crisis like this deepening that stigma, or perhaps going in the other direction? I mean, you've also talked about people really coming together in a moment where folks are feeling a lot of fragility.
I think in some ways, yeah, I think some people are feeling that kind of like it becomes a deeper shame, but this is not our shame to hold. This is not our shame to hold. I think that people on the opposite end are kind of like, yeah, me and my neighbors are going to go get food now, right? Like, so I do think in some ways there is a level of camaraderie that's coming together because we have to. I almost want to say, like, we don't have time to be feeling shame about needing something right now. Right now is the time for us to come together and take care of each other. And that's okay. It really is okay. But that stigma is something that we have been, it's something we've been combating for years as we've been building food sovereignty across the city, is people not wanting to be seen coming and picking up food, right? People not wanting to, people wanting to maintain their dignity. And I totally understand that. But I think right now it's okay for people to just take a breath. And it's okay for you to need something. It is okay for you to need care. And I want to keep reiterating that because that's what it's going to take for us to get through this right now.
Amanda, if state leaders succeed in passing temporary relief, which they've been talking about, how could those dollars reach the people you serve most effectively? What does that translation look like from Lansing to your neighborhood?
I think it looks like, truly, like, at its most basic level, giving people enough so that they can take care of themselves. I don't know how much families will receive. I don't know how much individuals will receive. But I do think that accompanying that legislature needs to be some form of writing that expresses that it's not just families that are going to need this food, right? I think a lot of the time in situations like this, we think like, oh, like, someone and their children, right? That's like the picture in your mind. But you have a lot of single people, a lot of elders, a lot of other people who don't necessarily have children, who also need things. So I would like to see those protections be put in place. But I also understand that, a lot of this is moving quickly. Tomorrow is Halloween, and then we go into a holiday season and people are not going to have food on their table. So I think giving folks enough to get through, even if it's to the end of the year, however that goes. But I think specifically in my neighborhood, in my community, it needs to be enough for that, my neighbor across the street, to make sure that her and her children are able to eat, to make sure that the elder couple next to them has the food that they need. Accessing, we're at the end of the season. So a lot of our farmers, unless they have 2 seasons that they can grow through, they might not have a lot of food left over. So are there other kinds of support for the people who work in the food chain, right? To aggregate product, to bring it into community. Those are the kind of things that I would like to see, is that it's not, we won't just need help for the people who are consuming, but, this entire food system is going to be disrupted. And so what happens to the people whose food didn't get sold, right? Mm-hmm. What happens to all of that? Everyone in that chain, I think that needs to be addressed. It can't just be, oh, we're going to give these families money, which is great, but what happened to everything else along that chain as well? How sustainable is that kind of emergency support if it doesn't help anybody else on the food chain?
Yeah. Amanda, it's always so great to talk to you because you remind us about how many hands are involved in our food system, and it is so many, and they are often unseen. So thank you. Amanda Brazel runs Finnegan's Farms in Detroit. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll head to Lansing, where leaders, including Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, are pressing for ways to keep food on the table while Washington fights. That's next on the Metro. Stay with us.